So when I was very young, my mother was from Scotland, and she was religious. I don't know as religious as some of the people in this room, but she was religious. She was a believer. And my father was a real worker, and he was religious too, but he was working all the time. And a good man, great heart, a very strong guy, but had a great heart. And I remember would walk down the street, like would walk down some street, and there'd be somebody holding a cup. You don't see it too much anymore, but you used to have, and they'd have pencils, and they'd actually sell you pencils. But he'd always put $100 in that cup. Always, he'd never pass that cup. And then $100 is probably like $1,000 today, right? So, but he was always very generous in that way. So I grew up in Queens, and oh, good. We have a lot of people. Good. It's good education. Getting through Queens is pretty good education. And that includes Brooklyn and a lot of other places, actually. But Queens was good. We had a very nice area, really a good area. But my parents thought going to church was important, and we'd go to church. But I really went to Sunday school. And I learned, and Sunday school really took place a lot of times on a Saturday. Does that make sense? Does that still happen, Saturday? I call it Saturday church. And we'd spend an hour, and we had some very good people teaching, pastors, ministers. I think we called them probably more ministers. And the church was associated, it was called First Presbyterian Church. And it was a very old building, but a beautiful building, just beautiful building, actually. And I'd love to go back and visit it sometime. I haven't been in that area in a little while, but I'd love to go back and visit it. But it was a great feeling. So I went to Sunday school on Saturday, and sometimes we'd have a little Sunday school after the church service, but most people liked it actually on Saturday better. And I did that for a while, a number of years, actually. And would go to church. And, the bottom line is it made me feel good. Even at a young age, it made me feel good. Sometimes you couldn't get out of there fast enough, I have to be honest with you. And sometimes a lot of it depended on who was there and who was your teacher. One of the things that did happen as I grew older, we went to Marble Collegiate because my father was in Queens and Brooklyn mostly, and I started there, and then I went to Manhattan and started doing things in Manhattan. I became much more Manhattan oriented, and I started a church, Marble Collegiate Church. It was a beautiful church, and down on Fifth Avenue in the 20s. And I started going there, and that was Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote the book, The Power of Positive Thinking. And I was telling stories about him. I don't know if you'd like me to do that, but
I'd love it.
he was a great, you could call him a pastor, I think, or a minister, but I never differentiated actually with him. But what he was is an unbelievable speaker and loved God, but he was able to speak. And, this doesn't often happen. And when the service was over, you were disappointed that it wouldn't continue. He would tell stories of modern day things as it related to the Bible. And he was actually an incredible storyteller. He told the story of Alfred Sloan, who was the founder of General Motors. And he was down and out. He suffered from massive alcoholism and lots of other problems. And then he came back, and, Norman, and he rose, and he'd tell the story about a man who became a great business leader, General Motors, especially, you could say especially then, because at that time there was they didn't have a lot of foreign competition. This was a whole ball game, and it was the biggest at that time. And he did a phenomenal job for a long period of time, and he became a very religious man, actually. But he told the story in great depth and detail, and it was always so fascinating the way he spoke. And I watched, because I didn't know him as a young minister or preacher, because a lot of people call him a preacher. And, I just called him a religious man that made religion very interesting. He made all aspects of religion very, very interesting. And probably it was the way he did it, his performance in a sense. But I watched him for a long time. I got married in the church, and he was the minister. And then what happened is I watched him get older, and he was still great into his late 80s. And I watched his last sermon, and he got up to the lectern, and he looked at the audience, and he said, I just can't do this anymore. He was just very tired. I was there, actually. It was amazing. And the whole church got up. And the church, by the way, you see some churches aren't getting big crowds. This church was packed every Sunday. When he spoke, every Sunday. And then they had the flow rooms, I guess they called them, where you had rooms that had like television sets or whatever it was, closed circuit, I think they called it. And you'd sit there and you hoped you didn't go there, but it's a reasonably big church, but sometimes, and they'd have them all over the place. I mean, they'd have all these rooms with it. Some of them pretty good sized rooms. The place was packed all the time. But I watched him as he got up, and he said that. He just said, no, I can't do this anymore. I won't be able to do this. It was his last sermon. And he always stood to the left of the lectern, and he was holding it. And he always held it, let it go, hold it, and walked around a little bit. But he was very comfortable to the left. I remember always it seemed that. But he was holding it with his right hand and just said, I can't do this anymore. And he was, I don't know if he hit 90, but he was not a young guy. But he was a fascinating person to watch. He was great. He was great. The other person that I found incredible, because my father would take me to Yankee Stadium to see Billy Graham, right? Billy Graham. And that place would be packed, and he was amazing. And he was, that was another one. And he had a gentleman who would sing, How Great Thou Art. You know who that is, right? Of course. And he sang it, Shay, that's right. He sang it for years, and my father thought it was the greatest. It was, I'd said, well, compare this to Elvis's version. Later on to my father, long later, but Elvis, this was before Elvis almost. But I said, Dad, which is better? He said, not Elvis. And we all like Elvis, right? But, he was just, he was great. But Billy Graham was great. He had an influence. He had a real influence. And it's nice to see Franklin Graham doing so well. He's doing so many things for so many people.
It's amazing because your faith has played such a role in your actions. Like when you mentioned Franklin, many people don't know that even recently you organized and gave $7 million to Samaritan's Purse for the North Carolina disaster relief. Amen.
Well, you couldn't give it to a better person. It's amazing. Yeah, we raised a lot of money and we gave a lot of money. I had a friend of mine, Steve Woodcoff, he gave him $1 million or something. They are just, a lot of people are very generous, but Franklin does a great job. He's always, whenever I go to, because as president, I do it a lot. You'd go to a tornado or you'd go to a hurricane. I mean, I saw a lot of very bad things. The destruction of nature is amazing. Some of these tornadoes, the big ones I watched, and I'd look and it was like cut by a razor blade. The damage on the left was 0, and the damage on the right was devastation. It would be like when you'd fly over it in a helicopter, you'd see a straight line, as straight as it could be, but it was literally cut. A tree on the left wasn't touched, a tree on the right was turned upside down, and sometimes it was 500 yards away. Amazing, the power of nature. But whenever I go there, I see Franklin. He's always there. He's always the first one to. I said, I'm going to beat you to one of these sites one of these days, Franklin. And he really means it. He's a good person. I mean, I had one problem with Franklin. Should I tell him the problem?
Sure.
She's saying, uh-oh.
It's a great one.
No, but I was telling, I tell stories. We have these big rallies. Last night we had a great rally at Madison Square Garden. And sometimes I'll use a little bit, not hard foul, but soft foul. We call it soft foul. But, to emphasize something about somebody's capabilities or whatever I might be talking about. And I got a letter from Franklin, and I met him at the airport. It was on a visit that I made to North Carolina. At the airport, he was there with his planes and everybody, a lot of people. Boy, he gets such great volunteers. They're really going. So anyway, I got a letter a couple of days later, and he says, Mr. President, it's Franklin Graham. And I just want to tell you, I love what you do. I love what you say. I love your stories. I think they're great. And keep telling them, but they'd be even better if you wouldn't use foul language. And I went, true. And I said, ooh. I didn't know. I wasn't sure. Was I supposed to be honored or not? And but he said the foul language. So I thought about it, and I said, I'm going to try. And I did try. And I'm not sure I'd make the emphasis quite as good. I've been pretty good about it, but I'm not sure. Every once in a while, you need a little bit of something, a little spice to juice them up a little bit. But I got that letter and I sort of laughed. I said, I'm not sure you're right about this, Franklin, but I'm going to give it a shot. But he's done a fantastic job. But so many of the people I know here that we just met backstage, I mean, they have been so incredible to us. And we've had them at the White House, a lot of the pastors and respected people. I recognized a lot of them just originally by just seeing them on television for so many years, right? Including you.
I was going to say, people don't realize